Well, hello there, students. Professor Coates here, presenting you a video with tips for the CIS 116 Chapter 8 assignment. Before we get started, let's take a look at the requirements for the program we're asked to build for this chapter. So here's the specifications document, and the goal of this application that we're about to build is to determine how long it will take for a hotel owner to break even on the investment that he's putting into increasing the quality of his water system. So he's going to install some equipment or whatever to upgrade the system, and the goal is to save money and use less water because the stuff he'll put in will be more efficient. And so what he's doing is he's hoping that he'll have less water usage on an annual basis and thereby save money. So in order to tell that, we need to take a look at what he was paying before the improvements were put in and then check after. So the way he wants to do this is to take a year's worth of water bills per month before the install, and then do the installation, and then take another 12 months worth of data after, and using that data to determine how much money he saved in the year with the improvements versus the year without, and then extrapolating that out, how many years, if that trend were to continue, how many years would he need to break even. So if he, just using some simple math here, if it cost him $100 to upgrade and he saves $25 a year, then it's going to take 4 years for him to recover his investment. So what we want the program to do basically is to ask the user for 12 values, which are water bills, before the installation, and then again ask another 12 questions for values after. We also need to know how much money it cost to do the installation of the water system upgrade. And once we have all of that data, then we can proceed to calculate how much money the owner saved. So the program says here that you need to show the order or the savings ordered from highest to lowest, and how many years it will take to pay for the system and break even. So let's take a look here at RubyMine and start writing some comments out to give us an algorithm or a list of steps, things we need to do. Okay, so first thing we want to do is ask the user for the cost of the upgrade. So we need to know what that is, obviously. We need then to ask the user to input the monthly water bills before the upgrade occurred. And then we're going to have to do the same thing after the upgrade. And then, once we have that, we can then calculate the savings for each month. And once we know that, we can calculate the total annual savings. And once we know that, we can project the number of years to break even on the investment. Then what we need to do is to display the savings amounts from highest to lowest. And then we need to display the break-even I call it break-even duration or whatever, something like that. The break-even duration for the user. Okay, so those are kind of a rough idea of the steps that are going to be involved here, the things I need to do. Now, before I do anything else, I'm going to come up to the top and I'm going to put in the comment block. Which is something you should always do. Water upgrade savings estimator, something like that. Program ch8 asg.rb, the course CIS 116, and then we have the instructor, yours truly, the assignment, we've already got that. I could put chapter here, I suppose, and then purpose. Simple program that compares the efficiency of a water system upgrade. That I should say compares, I should say determines the benefit cost savings, let's put it that way, determines the cost savings of a water system upgrade. Something like that is good enough. There's just a real simple description of what the programs are going to do. And then I'm going to tidy this up here a second. And we're good to go. So the first thing I want to do is bring in my utilities. File, so I can use that. Any functions I want to use in there. And I know that I'm going to need some arrays to hold my data. So I might as well build all of that up at the top here. So first of all, I'm going to need an array to hold the amounts before the install. So I'm going to make a new array called before install and then after install. And then I'm going to make another one called savings. And then I'm going to make another one called month names. Now this one is something I can create and put in right now because it's just a static array of month names. So I'll put that in here. So I'm just going to add in these particular values right at the top here. You know, these are not going to have to change, so might as well just declare them here and get it over with. And I'm going to put them on two separate lines because there's no point in flowing way off the edge of the screen there. Okay, so I've got my arrays here. I know that I'm going to need a variable called total savings. I'll set that to 0 to start with. And I'll probably need more variables, but for now, I'll just create those and we'll go from there. So, first step, ask user for the cost of the upgrade. So I'm going to print out, I cannot type here, print. How much will the upgrade cost for a single hotel? And I'll put a space there. And then what I'm going to do is create a variable called upgrade cost, set it equal to get s, and because it is a money value, we're going to pull it in as a float, or a floating point value. Now I'm going to make a validation loop here. The upgrade cost needs to be greater than 0. So until it's greater than 0, meaning if it's not, we're going to loop until it is. So if it's not, I'm going to print out invalid input. carriage return, and I'm going to ask the question again. And get the data again as well. So take this line of code here, and so that's one way that you can do user input validation. You ask the question, get the answer, and then you have a loop here that continues to execute until the answer is valid. And once it is, it moves forward from there. Okay, now I need to do the same thing now for the monthly water bills. So I'm going to put a statement in here, start with a carriage return, for each month before the efficiency upgrade, enter the water bill amount. And I'll put a carriage return on the end. Now for this, I'm going to create a loop. And the loop has to run 12 times because there's 12 months. So I'm going to run this loop from 0 to 11, which essentially is 12 times. And inside of my loop, I'm going to make another loop. And this loop will run and keep running until before install sub I is greater than 0. And what that means is I is my loop counter variable. So I will start at 0. And every time through this loop, it'll increment by 1. So the first time through the loop, I will be 0. If in the array before install, if I look at element I, which the first time through will be 0, so the first element, if the first element is greater than 0, it will move forward and go to the next month, or I will go up and it'll iterate through the loop again. But if the value inside of before install at position I is not greater than 0, it's going to repeat this inner loop, because if it's not greater than 0, we have a problem. So that means they entered 0 or a negative number. So basically here, if they screw up, we need to repeat the process. Well, what is the process? Well, the process is going to start by printing out the appropriate month name, and I called it month names with an S, so I will make that month names. So it's going to print month names. So what I'm going to say here is I'm going to say month names, and then I'm going to concatenate a colon and a space after it. So it'll print out January colon and then a space. Now what I want to do is I want to get the value, assume it's a float, so I'm going to call get s, convert it into a float, and I'm going to take that value and I'm going to put it into the array at position I. And this is the first time through the loop, it's going to put the value in position 0, or the first element. And if that value, so if before install sub I is less than 0, we're going to print a message out. Invalid. Let's say this. The cost value must be a positive number. Please try again. So if the value is less than 0, it will print out this message. This loop will continue to run as long as before install sub I is less than 0, because it'll run until it's greater than 0. Another way you could write this loop is you could say while it's less than 0. That actually, in this case, might be a little bit more of an intuitive way to read it. So we have a loop here that will run while the specific value we're dealing with is less than 0. It's going to run at least once, but it may run multiple times if the value the user entered is a negative number. So this loop will effectively ask for all 12 values, and we can do the same thing for the values after the upgrade. So I'll take that whole block of code, paste it down to the next section, and I'll change before to after. Here, before to after, and then here as well, and then here as well. And that's all I have to do. Now I've got a block of code to get the values before, block of code to get the values after. Now, to calculate the savings, since I have 2 arrays, I simply can do this. Savings sub I equals after install sub I minus before install sub I. That will effectively give me the savings for each month, and then what I can also do inside of this loop is say total savings plus equals savings sub I. So by the time I finish here, I have the savings per month and I have the total as well. So I've actually done both of those things in one step. So I'm going to put those in like you see it. Now, how many years does it take to break even? Well, all you have to do, years to break even equals the upgrade cost divided by total savings. So if the upgrade cost was $100 and my savings was $25, I simply divide the 2 values to get the years to break even. Now the question is, how do I show years to break even? Do I round up to the next highest year? Do I leave it the way it is? And it doesn't really matter here what you do. As far as logically speaking, you could say something like it's going to take you, 3.6 years, or you could just round it up to 4 if you wanted to do that. If you wanted to round it up, okay. If you wanted to round it up, you could just take the division and call the CEIL function, and it will round it, or essentially bring it up to the next highest year. Now, the tricky part. Display the savings amounts from highest to lowest. So we can sort the array of after install values. The problem is that the months need to also be carried across with the numbers. Now there are different ways of doing this. We'll talk about how we can do this in part 2 of this video, but for now, let's just make sure it works the way we have it. So I'm going to just display a report, if you will, of the results. So I'm just going to make a loop here, and I'm going to print out the month names sub I, colon, and a tab. I'll do a couple tabs. Then we will do a before install sub I dot. Now I can use my utilities here to put this in currency format, like that. Then a tab, and after install Sabai dot to currency. Oops. Another tab, and then savings Sabai dot to currency. And I will print a header also for this. So I'll print month, tab, before, tab, after, tab, and savings. And then I will put up here, print. It will take you years to break even, years to recover your upgrade investment. Okay. So I saved it. Let's see what happens when I run it. How much will upgrade cost? Let's just go ahead and keep these numbers really simple. I'll put 100 in here. And we're going to enter the amounts. So we'll say 10. I'm just going to put in some dummy data here. And then we'll go a little bit less for each. That. Now it looks like it's all over the place, so my formatting isn't really working right. Yeah, so we've got problems here, but let's see. Okay, what I forgot, or what I didn't do, is I didn't put a carriage return at the end of each line in my display loop. So that's a pretty big thing. Did you also notice when you're inputting this data how RubyMine mangles the carriage returns? There's a bug in the latest version of RubyMine. I upgraded it a couple days ago, and I noticed that when you enter user input now, it echoes back to you the answer, and then it does weird things with the spaces. So I've seen that. I don't know what the issue is yet. It's not your code doing that. So don't worry when you see that. That's something that they did in RubyMine. It's not, the problem is not in your code, right? Let me go back here and try this again. So $100 savings. And again, I'm going to, and you can see here how it echoes out. Very strange what it's doing here. So I don't understand what's going on there, but again, it's a bug in their code. It's not your issue. Okay, it still isn't quite right. I didn't put a carriage return on my header line, but you can see it's starting to look a little bit better here. Although my tabs aren't lining up very well yet, because if it goes to September, it flips the tab too many spaces over. Now, it's challenging to line everything up in columns in a text-based application because you don't know how long these month names are going to be. And so you don't know whether you should put one tab in here or two tabs. Now, you could look at the length of the text and programmatically determine, should I add one tab or two tabs? But that gets to be very tedious. Very tedious. So in this particular case, we're kind of in a quandary of how to make this look nice. There are a couple of options, things that we could do. But just before we get into all of that, just looking at the data itself, it looks like everything's looking good, except it will take you 0 years to recover your upgrade investment. That does not look right. So I need to fix that. I need to go in and I need to look at the way this data is being displayed. And we can do that in the next part of the video series here. But for now, this gives you an idea of how to get started, at least. And hopefully you can take it forward from here. So I'll finish this up in another installment of this video. But I wanted to get this out so at least you could get started on it and have a chance of a resubmit if you choose to do so. So I'll see you in the next video on this assignment.